Blake Lively, Part 3. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. We continue the examination of Blake Lively to make a determination as to what she is. We looked at her relationships with her mother, her father, and her siblings previously. Now, we're going to put under the Tudorscope her romantic relationships. The romantic relationships of an individual prove particularly insightful in assisting us in understanding what the person is. Where an individual has a succession of intimate relationships, perhaps one following hard on the heels of the other, with allegations or confirmed infidelities, that certainly paints a picture of narcissistic traits. On the contrary, an individual that has had a lower number of relationships with gaps in between supports reduced narcissistic traits. It's also the case that we examine what the parties have to say about one another. Is it the case that there's outright hostility, which points to tension and a fractious nature in the relationship, which might support unsavory behaviors which could be generated by narcissistic behavior? Is it the case that one of the parties has complained about the other? Have they both complained about one another? Is there evidence of falling out and abusive behavior between them? Alternatively, are the couple one which appear to get along very well? And indeed, there's an absence of scandal associated with them, an absence of abusive behavior, and they both spoke about one another in glowing terms. Keep in mind, of course, that you're examining here an individual who is an actress, and as a consequence of that, actresses and actors invariably have strong narcissistic traits because it's what goes with the profession. That doesn't translate into them necessarily being a narcissist, but it does frame much of the behaviors. Looking at the number of relationships, the age of the participants, the length of the relationships, what information we have about what went on in those relationships, whether there was any overlap between the relationships, allegations of infidelity, whether the relationships were seen as strong and solid, that the parties spoke favourably about one another. All of this helps us paint a picture with regard to the presence of empathic or narcissistic traits, aspects of the narcissistic dynamic, to assist in the formulation as to what the person is. In an interview back in 2012, Blake Lively stated as follows: "I've had 4 boyfriends in my whole life." At this stage, she was just 24 years old. Now, assuming that someone would commence a dating history at, say, 16, that means that that's 8 years of dating, with her suggesting that she's had just 4 boyfriends in that time. That would mean that on average it's 2 years for each one. Some might suggest that's a little towards the higher end with regard to the number of relationships that you might have had by that age, but it's not spectacularly so. Lively went on to state, "I've never been with anyone that's not a boyfriend. If I spend time with a man, it's because there's somebody that I know well who has been a friend for a while." Well, if this declaration is true, that points to somebody that appears to take her time getting to know somebody first, and pushes against the suggestion of an individual being a narcissist, because, as you know, invariably the narcissist wants to move the relationship on at a fast pace. The narcissist wants to ensure that the individual is brought under control as quickly as possible, hence the well-known love bombing that takes place, the flattery, the bribery, the taking the individual to exciting places, the lashings of exciting sex, being supportive and compassionate, and all of these other things so that the victim believes that they've met their soulmate. Invariably, the narcissist looks to get that person under control promptly, and it is often the case that cohabitation in a sexual relationship starts pretty quickly. If Lively's explaining that she has spent time with a man, then it's because it's someone that she knows well and that she's got to know them first. This goes against the usual modus operandi of a narcissist. This might be a significant piece of evidence, if, of course, it's true. But she claims that she's only had 4 boyfriends in her whole life. So who might the 4 be? Let's examine that. Lively's first known public relationship was with fellow actor Kelly Blatz. He was her co-star in the film Simon Says. The two began dating in May 2004, and they were also together as Lively hit it big with the Sisterhood of the Travelling Pants. She was 16 when they started the relationship. He was the same age. The first point to note from this is that they are co-stars. Now, it is commonly the case that people do meet at work. After all, it's a place that you spend a lot of time together. Furthermore, it's the case that when you have a situation of actors and actresses being together, it's often the case that they might have to engage in screen intimacy. They're also involved in spending long days potentially together filming scenes where they are portraying certain emotions. And in the circumstances, it's hardly a surprise that many relationships, in terms of proper relationships or affairs, spring up between people on TV and film sets. But it is indicative of an absence of boundary recognition to start a relationship with your co-star. You're meant to be there to work. And this doesn't mean that somebody is a narcissist, but the fact that somebody transgresses the professional and work boundary to enter into a relationship is a narcissistic indicator. Naturally, it's not determinative of itself. Interestingly, Lively and Kelly Blatz were childhood pals. Lively claims to have had a crush on Blatz since they were kids, and that he finally came around in 2004 when they filmed Simon Says together. An interesting point to note here is that narcissists often claim to have been in love with someone or had a crush on them for some time beforehand. I have dealt with many of my clients who've explained, for instance, that an individual has said, "Oh, I've loved you from afar from years," where the two were vaguely known to one another. The victim had no idea, and of course explains that they found the idea that someone had been admiring and loving them from afar for some time rather lovely to hear, that it certainly massaged the ego. But it is a common narcissistic manipulation to do that. If the narcissist did have such admiration from afar, they would have acted on it far sooner. In effect, what the narcissist is doing is engaging in a revision of history. There was no crush. What the narcissist does is, for the purposes of asserting control over the victim at, let's say, the beginning of 2025, the narcissist alludes to having had a admiration, a love, for the preceding 2 years. The narcissist will not have done. Their attention will have been directed elsewhere. But in order to make the victim feel good about themselves, to make it seem that there's already something there which legitimizes moving fast into a relationship, after all, one of the parties has been waiting for the relationship for years, it is common that the narcissist, in order to assert control in that moment, will talk about the fact that there's been an existing admiration, long-standing unrequited love, a crush beforehand. Now, at the time that Lively stated this, she was very young, and it could be the case that it was genuine with regard to the crush, but it is worth noting that this is a common narcissistic manipulation that is utilised. Their relationship ended in April 2007. They broke up just as Lively was becoming an even bigger name thanks to her role as Serena van der Woodsen in Gossip Girl. Little information exists about the relationship itself and the parties' views about one another. At least there is nothing public that suggests that the relationship was problematic in any way, that there was any abusive behaviours between the two, and that there was any suggestion of cheating. and therefore this early relationship appears to have passed off without any publicly known incident. The next relationship, the second boyfriend that Lively has referred to, was Penn Badgley. Their relationship began in May 2007. She was 19 and he was 20. Note that the relationship with Blatz had only ended the month before, and within 1 month, Lively was already in another relationship. This almost seamless move from one relationship to another is often seen with the narcissist. This is because the narcissist invariably requires an intimate partner primary source, one individual that can be relied upon to be easily controlled, who provides the bulk of fuel, character traits, and residual benefits. In essence, it's a little bit like ensuring that you shop at a supermarket rather than going around 50 independent stores. To obtain your produce, it's simply easier, more convenient, and uses less effort. This seamless move from one to another is indicative of the necessity of the narcissist having an intimate partner primary source so that they don't have to spend time dealing with the independent stores, extending the analogy that I've just mentioned. Thus, we have a potential indicator given the fact that her relationship with Badgley came about hard on the heels of that of Kelly Blatz. It also raises the question of, could there have possibly have been something going on beforehand? It is commonly the case with the narcissist that they will, during the period of sustained devaluation with intimate partner primary source A, cheat. And whilst they may not necessarily end up in a proper relationship with the person they're having an affair with, what can happen is that when the narcissist subconsciously recognizes that the affair partner is coming under control and is essentially seen as a better choice to that of the incumbent IPPS, they then swap them. The IPPS becomes the former IPPS, and the affair partner, the intimate partner secondary source, becomes the intimate partner primary source. This is why you will often find narcissists entering new relationships rather quickly. People often think, how did they get into that relationship so promptly? How did they manage to find somebody? Well, quite simply, they'd already found them behind your back. And that's what you're experiencing in relation to the fact that the person you were with has ended the relationship and then popped up days later with somebody else. Might this have been the case in relation to Lively, Badgley, and Blatz? It's a possibility, given the closeness of the end of the relationship with Blatz and the start of the one with Badgley. Badgley and Lively had a relationship that spawned the first few years of their show that they starred in as love interests, Gossip Girl. Note once again that Lively is having an intimate relationship with a co-star. This may well support an absence of boundary recognition as a consequence of the transgression of the professional and work boundary, the operation of a sense of entitlement. Furthermore, it has been suggested that the relationship with Badgley was primarily a PR vehicle, given that they were co-stars. If that is the case, then that demonstrates the utilization of a relationship for some ulterior motive, which, of course, would be seen as a narcissistic trait. Their relationship ended in autumn 2010. Lively met Reynolds on the set of Green Lantern in 2010. It is claimed that they did not develop a romantic relationship until a year later. However, at the time, it was alleged that Lively and Reynolds were having an on-set relationship, with him cheating on his then-wife Scarlett Johansson and Lively cheating on Badgley. If this is accurate, this demonstrates the narcissistic trait of infidelity and an absence of emotional empathy or reduced emotional empathy by conducting an affair whilst being in a relationship with somebody else. Interestingly, Badgley has always spoken cordially as opposed to coldly about Lively, And also of interest is the fact that the pair continued to film together following their breakup, which suggests that either the rumours of her infidelity with Reynolds were not true when they first met in 2010, or perhaps lend some strength to the fact that the relationship was more PR-based than genuinely intimate, leading Badgley not to be particularly concerned. Or, quite simply, he's moved on from it. Again, the swirling rumours of affair, the proximity of the relationship, and the fact that it's with a co-star all flag up more narcissistic indicators than do not. The relationship, as I mentioned, ended in autumn 2010. Accordingly, that's the first two of the boyfriends that Lively has had an involvement with. So who are the next two? Let's find out in part 4.